They found Mark's body yesterday. He was the third one in 2 weeks. Like the others, there were no signs of violence, no indications of a struggle, just that grotesque smile drawn on his face, not with paint or makeup, but as if something had pressed against the skin from the inside out, forcing the corners of his mouth into a macabre caricature of joy. I knew I would be next. Ever since that night at Black Star Circus, I knew we were all marked. But let me go back to the beginning and try to explain how 5 childhood friends ended up caught in a revenge that began more than 50 years ago. It all started when the circus arrived in town. It was different from modern circuses. The tents were a faded red, almost brown, and there was something about the way the trailers and caravans were arranged that seemed off, as if the space between them was greater than should have been possible. Lucas, always the most adventurous one, suggested we go to the midnight show. "It's special," he said, showing the black tickets with golden letters. "Only for people over 18. That night, we had no idea we were walking straight into a nightmare that had started in 1973. It was Amanda who first noticed that something was wrong. During the performance, she gripped my arm and pointed to a dark corner of the tent. "There's someone there," she whispered, "someone watching us." At first, I saw nothing but shadows. But then, between acts, when the lights dimmed, I started to notice a figure, too tall, too thin, wearing a scorched clown outfit. He didn't move with the rest of the troupe. He just stood there, watching our group with eyes that seemed to emit their own glow in the darkness. During intermission, we overheard 2 workers talking. 50 years, one of them said. 50 years since they locked laughs in the burning trailer. They say you can still hear him laughing to this day. Mark, always the skeptic, laughed at the story. "Cheap urban legends to attract an audience," he said, but his voice trembled slightly. When the intermission ended, things got worse. The smell of smoke grew stronger, even though there hadn't been any fire acts. And that figure, now it was closer. Its face was a twisted mask of pain and amusement, the melted makeup revealing burnt skin underneath. That was when the main lights failed, leaving only the emergency lights. In the dark, we heard laughter. It wasn't joyful, it was rough, like paper being torn apart. And then he appeared in the center of the ring. The burned clown was just a few meters away from us. His skin was a grotesque mix of old makeup and scarred tissue. But it was his eyes that paralyzed me. There was nothing in them but a black, smoldering void. "Welcome to the special show," his voice crackled like burning embers. "You have been chosen for a very special act." Amanda tried to stand up, but her legs wouldn't respond. None of us could move. The rest of the audience had vanished. It was as if we were trapped in a distorted version of reality, where only the 5 of us and that creature existed. "In 1973, he continued, moving unnaturally toward us, "they locked me in the trailer. They said it was just a joke. They laughed while I burned alive. Now," his smile stretched impossibly wide, "it's my turn to make everyone laugh." With a simple gesture, marks began to appear on our wrists, small burns in the shape of a smile. "So you are my new captive audience," he chuckled. "With every full moon, one of you will join my permanent show." Lucas was the first, 3 days later. They found him in his room, a forced smile on his face and the smell of smoke lingering in the air. Then came Amanda a week later. Finally, Mark. Now only I and Carla remain. The next full moon is in 2 days. We have spent the last few weeks frantically researching, trying to find a way to break this curse. It was Carla who found the old records of the circus. The clown, Joseph Rizos Martinez, was not a good person even in life. There were reports of missing children in every town where the circus performed. Even the other performers feared him. The fire in the trailer was not an accident or a prank. It was justice. But the way it was done, locking him inside, giving him a slow and painful death, turned an execution into something worse. It turned Rizos into something beyond death. "There has to be a way," Carla insisted, flipping through another dusty file. That's when we found it. An old photo of the circus showing the trailer where he had died. In the background of the image, almost imperceptible, there was a symbol painted on the door. A protective rune, as we now knew, meant to keep something trapped. The circus was still in town. Last night we sneaked onto the grounds. The original trailer still existed, hidden under old tarps at the back. The symbol was there, nearly erased by time. According to our research, if we could complete it again, using salt and iron, we could trap resource back inside. But something went wrong. Carla was finishing the symbol when we heard that laugh. The air grew thick with the smell of smoke. And then she screamed. When I turned around, she was suspended in the air, her face contorted as something pressed against her skin from the inside out, forcing an eternal smile. I ran. I hate myself for it, but I ran. Now I'm alone, writing this account as a warning. The full moon is tomorrow. I know he will come for me, but I discovered something in my research that maybe, just maybe, might work. The symbols don't need to be on the trailer. They just need to trap the spirit inside something. Tonight I will try one last thing. I will use my own body as a prison. The symbols are already tattooed onto my skin. If it works, I can trap Risos forever. If it doesn't, well, at least I'll go out smiling. Note found days later. The author's body was discovered inside the abandoned trailer. Unlike the other victims, there was no smile on his face, just an expression of determination. His body was covered in burned symbols, and witnesses say that sometimes on nights of the full moon, a muffled laugh can still be heard coming from his grave. But the Black Star Circus never again performed its special midnight show. There are moments that forever change the way you see the world. For me, it was on a Saturday night, in the summer of my 15th year. Lucas, my best friend, had convinced me to go to that traveling fair that had set up in the parking lot of the old mall. It's going to be fun, he said. What could go wrong? The place was practically empty when we arrived. Just a few scattered families and bored teenagers wandering between game stalls and worn-out rides. The flashing lights of the attractions cast strange shadows on the asphalt, and the overly cheerful music from the speakers only made everything more unsettling. It was between the rusted Ferris wheel and a motionless carousel that we saw him for the first time. A clown, too tall, too thin, wearing a faded striped jumpsuit. He was simply standing there watching people pass by. He didn't joke around, didn't hand out balloons. He just stood there, motionless. "That's a weird clown," Lucas commented, trying to sound casual. But there was tension in his voice. Something about that figure was wrong. The makeup looked too old, smudged, as if it had been applied days ago, and his movements, when he finally moved, it was in a disjointed way, as if his joints didn't work properly. We tried to ignore him, but it was impossible not to notice how he started following us. Not in an obvious way. He just appeared in different places wherever we went. Near the cotton candy stand, behind the house of mirrors, close to the portable restrooms, always maintaining that strange posture, always watching us with eyes that seemed too deep behind the makeup. "Let's get out of here," Lucas whispered after half an hour. His voice trembled slightly. "There's something really wrong with that guy." I agreed immediately. We started walking toward the exit, trying to act natural. That's when I noticed that the clown had changed his expression. The painted smile, previously neutral, seemed to have stretched. Not naturally, it was as if someone had torn the corners of his mouth. The parking lot was even emptier now. Our footsteps echoed on the asphalt as we walked quickly toward the main road. Every few steps I looked back, and each time the clown was there, closer, moving in that wrong way like a spider wearing human clothes. Lucas started running first. I followed without hesitation. The sound of our sneakers hitting the ground was too loud in the silence of the night. And then we heard another sound. Footsteps behind us. Fast, irregular footsteps, as if the legs producing them were too long, articulated in the wrong way. We ran through the empty streets of the neighborhood, our lungs burning. My house was only a few blocks away, but every meter felt like an eternity. The sound of the footsteps behind us never faded. Sometimes it seemed to come from the left, sometimes from the right, as if our pursuer was in multiple places at once. Finally, we spotted my street. The streetlights flickered irregularly, creating pockets of darkness between one house and another. Lucas stumbled and I helped him up. That was the moment I looked back again. The clown was in the middle of the street, about 30 meters away. The dim light revealed details I wished I hadn't seen. His body looked even longer now, as if it had stretched. His arms hung below, his knees, his fingers ending in darkened points. And his face had completely changed. There was no more makeup. His skin was far too pale, like old paper, and where a nose should have been, there was only a black void. The torn smile stretched all the way to his ears, revealing rows of sharp teeth. And his eyes were like pools of liquid darkness. "Run!" I shouted to Lucas, pushing him toward my house. We crossed the yard in seconds, my hands trembling so much that I could barely hold the keys. When I finally unlocked the door, we practically fell inside. We locked all the doors, shut all the windows. My parents weren't home. They were at a birthday dinner at a friend's house. Lucas and I curled up on the living room couch, panting, trying to process what had just happened. "He can't come in," I murmured, more to convince myself than anything else. "We're safe in here." That's when we heard it, a soft sound against the front window, like fingernails scratching the glass. Lucas pointed with a trembling hand. There, on the other side of the window, was the clown. His body looked even more distorted, bent at impossible angles to fit in the small space of the porch. His face was pressed against the glass, that toothy grin now far too wide for a human face. And he was watching us. He didn't move, didn't try to enter. He just observed with those empty eyes, as if he were memorizing our faces, as if he were marking us. We remained frozen for what felt like hours. At some point, I must have closed my eyes. When I opened them again, he was gone. But something had changed. On the fogged-up glass where his face had been pressed, there was a message written in crooked handwriting. "See you soon, boys." Lucas stayed at my house that night. We didn't really sleep. We stayed up until dawn, jumping at every shadow. Every noise. Days passed, weeks, months. The clown never appeared again. The fair left town, leaving only tire marks on the empty parking lot. But something had changed in us permanently. Lucas moved away the following year. His parents said it was because of his father's job, but I knew it was more than that. He was never the same after that night. As for me, well, I still live in the same house. I still avoid looking out the front window after dark. I still wake up sometimes in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, with the feeling of being watched. Because deep down I know that "see you soon" wasn't an empty threat. He is waiting, somewhere in the shadows, in the empty spaces of the night. That torn smile still exists. And sometimes when I'm home alone and hear a scratch at the window, I wonder if tonight will be the night he keeps his promise. My name is Arthur. I'm 27 years old, and I've never been the kind of person who believes in supernatural things. But if someone asked me today if I think it's possible to be followed by something that shouldn't exist, I wouldn't know what to say. It all started when my mother decided to renovate my grandparents' house, which had been closed for almost 10 years since they passed away. It was an old 2-story house with dark furniture and that characteristic smell of aged wood. Marcos and I, my brother, went to help with the cleaning. We found photo albums, old toys, and some forgotten boxes inside a closet in our grandparents' bedroom. That's when we found that box. It was different from the others. Dark wood, sealed with dried-out adhesive tape. When we opened it, we found moldy papers, some clothes, and a blue-covered photo album. The cover was stained, and the pages were stuck together with time. We flipped through it together and saw that they were old photos of our family, probably from the 80s and 90s. But as we turned the pages, one detail started to bother me. A clown. He was in several photos, sometimes in the background, sometimes near the children, but he never smiled, never seemed to actually be part of the scene. "Who is this?" I asked my mother. She took the album, and her face went pale. I don't know." "What do you mean?" "He's in several photos." She furrowed her brows. "We never had clowns at our parties." The way she said it gave me chills. She sounded too certain. I took the album home. I needed to look at these pictures more closely. That night I scanned some images and tried to enlarge the clown's face. And that's when I noticed something impossible. He looked different in each photo. His body was at slightly different angles. His face seemed to change. The smile, once subtle, was widening. In one of the pictures, His head was tilted to the side as if he were watching me. My breathing became heavy. My instincts screamed that something was wrong, but then I noticed something worse. There was a new photo in the album, one I was sure hadn't been there before. It was a picture of Marcus and me, still children, sitting on the couch at our grandparents' house, and behind us, the clown was crouching, smiling. His eyes were far too dark, and he was holding one of our toys. I shut the laptop and put the album away. But that night I woke up to a strange sound, paper being crumpled. I got up, still groggy, and went to the living room. The album was open on the table, but I had put it away in the drawer. As I got closer, I noticed there were photos scattered on the floor. My heart pounded. I picked one up and my vision blurred. The clown. Now he was closer to my family. My fingers trembled as I turned another page of the album. In the next photo, he was behind my mother, with one of his hands on her shoulder. And then my phone vibrated. A message from my mother. "Arthur, I found another photo of you as a child. Take a look." The image loaded slowly. It was me, around 6 years old, in my grandparents' backyard. I was holding a toy, and behind me, the clown was there. And the worst part, his hand was resting on my shoulder. The next night, after the phone call, I was in the bathroom, brushing my teeth, trying to ignore everything that had happened. The dim light above the mirror flickered slightly, and my reflection trembled faintly due to the steam from the hot water. Then, as I wiped my face with the towel, something made me freeze. My reflection didn't move. My heart pounded in my chest. I stood there, motionless, waiting. And then, my reflection smiled. But I hadn't smiled. The smile was slow, stretching the mouth beyond what should have been possible. I took a step back, and the reflection remained still, staring directly at me. Then it began to move. But it wasn't a normal mirror. The reflection turned its back to me, and there, where the back of my head should have been, there was another face smiling. A white face, the cracked paint, the clown. I screamed and kicked the mirror, shattering it on the floor. But among the shards, the image was still there. He was looking at me from inside the broken pieces. I decided to install a security camera app on my phone to see if anything strange happened during the night. I slept on the couch. I woke up with a shiver. The smell of old paint filled the air. I grabbed my phone and reviewed the recording. At first, everything seemed normal, but then, at a certain point in the footage, the screen went black for a few seconds. The audio continued. A rustling sound, something dragging across the floor. When the image returned, something had changed. There was a new figure in the video. In the corner of the room, facing away from the camera, a crouched body. Someone dressed in an old, dirty suit, their head tilted to the side. Motionless. Then, in the video, the body began to rise, slowly. The shoulders moved in an unnatural way, as if the bones were disjointed. I already knew who it was, but it was when he started turning his head toward the camera and looked directly at me. The recording suddenly stopped. The file was corrupted, but seconds before the screen went dark, the reflection on my phone screen showed something behind me. I was being watched. The next morning, I ran to an abandoned lot and burned the album. But then I felt a weight on my shoulder. I turned slowly and saw a white painted hand gripping my shoulder. My vision darkened. I looked at the ground among the ashes of the burned album. There was a new photo. It was a picture of me taken that morning, and behind me, the clown was closer than ever. That was when I understood I hadn't destroyed anything, I had set him free. If these stories made your heart race and left you suspicious, even of the shadows around you, then don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next terrifying stories. And we want to know, which of these stories gave you the most chills? Have you ever experienced something unexplainable, felt like you were being watched, or encountered something that shouldn't exist? Share your experience in the comments. Who knows, your story might appear in one of the next videos. Share it with your friends, but be careful. You never know who or what might be watching.